Hello and welcome to Future Procurement. My name is Robert Freeman, and today we are continuing our conversations with procurement leaders from all over the world, and today we have the honor to invite the guest, Daryl Powers from the US, who will be joining over the Skype this week. And last week we have received a lot of the positive feedbacks around the new formats that we have launched, so I'm very excited to continue in this format. And Daryl describes himself as a creator of strong business relationships, growing business and increasing the profit. And when I received his first message through LinkedIn, I was so excited in the way he formulated his thoughts and in the way he presented himself that I said that for sure we should talk. And now finally we are talking to Daryl Powers. So hello, Daryl, and very happy to have you with us.
Robert, thank you very much. I'm excited for the opportunity. I'm excited to not only just share, I guess, my knowledge and my experience, but to just share in this dialogue, to be able to express some of my background, some of my perspectives, and hopefully many of your listeners, but even if it's just a few, take some things away from this that really help them in their professional development, in their careers. The value of that is going to be tenfold. It will just compound and compound over time as they grow and as they continue to share and explore in their career. So I'm really looking forward to this.
That's great. When you have written your first message to me, Daryl, it was you were asking about the opportunity to grow the business while lowering the costs through the strong buyer-seller relationships. And this, to my opinion, very much describes your viewpoint on the job you are doing. So can you say in the nutshell, what was your way to this place where you are now? And I know that you have a strong and long experience in the job, and you have a strong background. So if you can describe in a nutshell what was your way until the place you are now.
Sure. So many people look at business relationships in terms of buyer and seller. Either you're on the buyer side of the relationship, and that's your knowledge is there and your approach is there, or you're on the seller side and you're trying to sell and grow revenue and so forth. My perspective and my experience is really the hybrid, right in between those two. It's the crossroads between buyer and seller. That's really where the magic is. It isn't one side or the other, but it's what can happen when those two sides come together and create something completely different, a real strong relationship. And I don't mean just friendship and trust and loyalty, but something where ideas are created and then they help turn into reality. And in most cases, revenue can be earned not just by selling and selling more and looking to sell more, but by looking at the business relationship, the infrastructure, the supply stream, and seeing where inside of that can we reduce costs? Where can we do things better? Where can we do things faster? Maybe purchase things less expensively. And if we can gain some momentum and some traction in those areas, well, more often than not, what happens is more volume will move through that and more revenue will come. And new projects and new initiatives will then start to be brought to that same table through those same team members. And again, more ideas, more momentum will move through that. So if you look at the entire business relationship, not so much in terms of just buying or selling or in terms of just growing revenue or saving money, if you look at it in terms of that whole sphere, start saving money first and the revenue will come.
I like this one. So you really painted a really bright picture around this, and also like the way you express it. Again, I'm impressed with the way you describe the things, not only your idea itself, but also the way you express it. So what you said is that the magic happens between buyer and seller, but not in the, let's say, contract or price discussion itself, but somewhere beyond it. So is it relationship which is in the core of this, or how would you describe this magic? What exactly do you mean here?
Yes, I would say relationship. And when you think about relationship, Robert, and even in our personal lives, what's really the foundation of that? Well, it's a good relationship is trust. And as we
Exactly.
all know, trust is earned. Well, in a business exchange, that trust has to be earned, and on both sides of the table. So if a seller is promising something, or they're setting a price, or this in the more tactical aspects of that business relationship, well, then it's very important for them to hold up to their bargain. It's very important to them when they have opportunities that maybe the buyer isn't aware of. Bring them those opportunities, and some of those opportunities might be cost savings or cost advantage that in the short term might be a disadvantage to the seller.
Exactly.
A disadvantage in terms of profit. Wow, I can get if I keep this little topic a secret, I can get a little bit more out of this. I can milk this a little bit more. Well, you probably can, but you're risking eroding that trust.
Yeah.
Where a lot more often, if you bring that to the table, share in that savings, share in that opportunity, or just pass it forward, now you've earned a stronger trust from that buyer. And now the next time that buyer has a challenge, the next time they have a problem or an opportunity, they're going to be more likely to call that seller.
Exactly.
Because they've earned, and so that's really the foundation of it. So if you think about it in terms of your personal relationships and the best ones, that's really the foundation of it. So you've spent time with each other, with frequency, with opportunity, and you've taken those opportunities to earn trust. And as you know, in your own personal life, your most loyal friendships, those relationships that are really strongly bound, those are those are earned through a lot of experiences, a lot of challenges, a lot of good times, and those are all the fabric of that relationship. So you take that and you just apply it to a business scenario and treat it the same way. How can you help? How can you help the person out? And if you're the buying side of the table, same approach. You've got a seller that continues to deliver and deliver and deliver. Well, reward them.
Yeah.
Don't just continue to penalize them and pressure them, because the same thing. And that relationship over time will erode. It'll become very hard. It'll become cold. It might still be functional and transactional, but you're not really going to get that growth and momentum for growing revenue and savings long term.
What do you think is the difference? Because I really like it's almost like a philosophy, but also at the same time, I feel like there can be difference between what I call cooperative approach towards suppliers, which mostly happens in direct procurement, for example, and really competitive environment where you really struggle to get any extra cent if you can. I mean, could you also apply the same approach of building the long trust relationship with your supplier-buyer relationship in the really competitive environment? Can you maybe elaborate and give some examples or some practical advice for people who are really working, for example, in indirect, having the really harsh times to get any extra cent of savings in the very competitive environment, where you really don't know if you will continue to work with this supplier over, I don't know, 1 year or so?
Sure. No, that's a great question, Robert. And yes, that indeed is a challenge. The solution is very, very similar in any business where the margins are very slim. Pennies matter, half of pennies matter, and competition is everywhere. There's you kind of look at it in terms of a defensive strategy and an offensive strategy, almost like a sporting event.
Exactly.
And if you could look at it in terms of some of the traditional approaches in those relationships, pricing, standard bidding, auctions, reverse auctions. Some organizations will even help build competitors to make sure that the competitive landscape it continues to be vibrant and can continue to drive down those costs. So in those environments, you're not going to be able to get around that. In fact, that's part of the dilemma that we're facing when you describe it. So with that said, knowing that exists, now think about that just one more step. If in those situations, a lot of that savings and a lot of that pressure is transactional, it is short term. If to be able to look at creating next generation savings. What's that next step? And it just gets a little bit into, world-class discussion and so forth. But what's the next frontier for that relationship or for that business segment? What type of savings can be generated that's more systemic? What's more of a supply stream savings, getting maybe beyond that first tier supplier into the second, the third. You're not going to find those opportunities if you are simply transaction focused and simply bidding and auctioning. You're not going to really be able to tap into that supply stream and the savings there. So in those situations, you'd have to look at it a little bit strategically as a procurement manager and decide who of this competitive vendor set, do I at least think has the ability to scale with us, maybe has the ability or the interest aligned with us in terms of taking some next steps, and then open up some of that dialogue. Start asking that vendor, what is it about your costs? What is it about the hurdles? What is it that our organization is doing to prevent you from selling into us at a lower cost?
Exactly.
And start to find out what that is. And then you don't just take that monster on your own shoulders, but now you partner with that vendor a little bit, and maybe it's just a little bit.
Oh.
What can you do, vendor? What can your supplier do to help here? What can we do as your customer?
Exactly.
Maybe remove a hurdle or two. So not only you, but maybe that second tier vendor that is hindered from this. Now they can be more successful. And in those competitive environments, as you know, even a small gain can become a big reward. And again, if that now is something that's systemic, it's scalable. Well, now as you move more volume through that, and as that next year start to evolve, well, that savings, that just becomes, it starts to compound. And you really have a strong engine now that is systemically saving you money, more so than just passing bids around a table like a blackjack dealer. That's where these relationships and these organizations can really start to set themselves apart and be doing something that saves them money years down the road.
I like this approach a lot. And so what you said, Daryl, was that of course there will be e-procurement, there will be always some part or some segments or some products which will be sourced simply by bidding or by auctioning or whatever. But at some point there should be evaluation of more strategic partners and looking into more long-term relation with some of the partners, where you should really go beyond price and look into not only perceiving price discussions as cutting the margins from suppliers, but also the discussion about going beyond that and looking into really costs and what creates those costs, and where can we together, as you started the discussion, I like it, where we can together find the opportunities to reduce cost, and by this to reduce the prices.
Too often people, and you've heard it, they say, well, you find the solution, find the answer to the problem. Well, that implies that if you just look around enough, that you're going to uncover something and there's the answer. More often than not, the answer needs to be created. It needs to be
I like it.
A combination of ideas and uncoverings and discoveries, and then that idea, that solution is now created, and that becomes your next steps. But without that dialogue, without understanding and getting a little bit deeper into the system, you'll never find that. You'll just keep firing away at the same targets. And also, I'm sure, as a lot of your listeners know, eventually, just by managing the transactional and the traditional bidding approaches, which again are prudent, they do save money, and I certainly recommend it. But that you'll start to find the floor to that. You get to a point where even in a highly competitive market, where there just isn't much more you can do there, without now sacrificing supply, without sacrificing quality, and a lot of the core things that you need in order to keep that business running. I think that is where I think that part of the dilemma is because a lot of organizations have found themselves there and they don't know what to do next.
That's very interesting.
There's no more low-hanging fruit. Now what? well, that's where you need to get into the system.
One more practical question. Very recently, maybe last week, I received a question from our Vietnamese student, if I call him student, who was going through our cost-based pricing course from Future Procurement. And he asked me in LinkedIn about some hints or advice to implement or to go to cost-based pricing way of thinking with the suppliers or vendors who are really used to work only by competition, who are really scared to be transparent and open, even a little bit. I mean, how to make the quotation process, or how to break this invisible wall between you and your partners on the other side of the table, to start them sharing and trusting you that they can really share their cost structure, for example, or even the biggest cost drivers. How to break this mental wall between you and supplier?
Oh, that is it's a great question. It's my perspective on that, Robert, is that whoever really is most interested in taking that next step and creating that advantage, they need to step forward first. So if that buyer is interested in breaking down those walls, even if just a little bit, they need to step out into that scary space. They need to step out first.
I like it.
And not just unveil everything, but just like you would in a personal relationship. If there's somebody you identify that, we kind of connect a little bit, or I'd like to do more, or take a next step with this relationship. Well, you're going to reach out a little bit. Maybe you're going to share a little bit about your family life or your personal life, or some experience you've had, just a little bit more than you did in the past. And then you need to reward, in this case, if it's the buyer to the seller, and then as soon as that buyer crosses that threshold and enters into that space, reward them. Don't penalize them. Reward them with some revenue, some opportunity. Seller, vendor, if you step into this space, you help open up here, because I've opened up some things to you. Join me here, and there's reward behind it. And maybe quantify. It doesn't even have to be dramatic, but at least, again, to earn a little bit of trust. Here's some additional reward. You're not going to expose much. I understand that. You're not going to get much, but you'll get something, and back that up. And then little by little, just like any relationship, it's a process. I really like your analogy, Daryl, and I think for me personally, and I believe that for our listeners also, keep this analogy in mind, and always building trust with your partners in business. It's not a lot different from building trust in a personal relationship. So I really, really like your analogy or your parallel on this. Just one more quick thought on that. It also, to think about it that way, helps keep it simple. It helps simplify it.
Exactly.
So in the haste of business, in the haste of competition, and even on your way home at the end of the day, to put it in that perspective helps keep those business relationships simple and something that you can understand, and it helps you see the next step a lot clearer.
I like it. Also, one of the point in our podcast is to ask ourselves, how can we release ourselves from unnecessary stress? How can we be more confident in ourselves and in our way of doing business? And I think this advice you have given, Daryl, also helps to keep the peace of mind when you don't need to build enormously complicated tactics. What will you say, and how would you react on on some kind of things? But instead, if you are trying to build the trust and trying to go to really open and honest relationship, trying to understand each other with your vendors, I think this also releases this unnecessary frustrations and stresses connected to some preparing to negotiations or thinking through what have you said, how have you said it, etc.
Well, Robert, that's a great point. You're right. That's to take that one more step in terms of stress reduction and taking pressure off yourself. That's you're exactly right. That's what happens, especially in those negotiations, and and even as simple as a phone call.
I like it. Right. Daryl, to continue on our talk, can you share a little bit about the ways how can people from procurement and supply chain management have the constant and renewing source of energy and enthusiasm for their work? Because also a lot of the questions we receive here in future procurement are around demotivation or frustration, also partly connected, as I said, to these tough negotiations with the vendors, or also pressure from the management of the company, from CEO or CFO, about the price reductions and delivering on results. How in all of this crazy and hectic atmosphere to keep high energy and be active and enthusiastic and have what I call fire in the eyes? Do you have any hint on that?
Sure. You have to make some, a regular practice, and I put it in these terms, of elevating yourself. In all of our roles, in all of our jobs, it is so easy to get sucked into daily grind, hammer and fist, daily chores, just trying to keep the business and everything moving forward. And days can turn into weeks, and weeks can turn into months sometimes before people recognize that they haven't come up for a breath of air. And that in itself can really be demotivating. It can be deteriorating. In some cases, it's difficult to even look to see what you've accomplished because there's a whole series of fires.
Exactly.
So you need to make a regular practice of elevating yourself. You need to, you need to spend some time working on your business rather than working in it. Working on your professional development rather than just executing within it every day. Creating time is difficult. It's difficult for everybody, but we do it. We create time. We create time for vacations. We create time for dental appointments, different things that come up. We find a way to squeeze that into our calendars and get that done. So, to take and force some allocated time into your schedule, even if it's on some personal time, in the evenings, or, in some transition times, if you're on the train on your way home, or, some area where you can get separated from family, you can keep separated from business and work to elevate yourself. And there are several tools and techniques that you can do while in that time. But I think, overall, that is a hugely important thing that we all underestimate, the value of stepping away from that and then looking at yourself as a professional, reflecting on your business, not in it, on it. Don't worry about what's happening tomorrow. What's happening next quarter? What do you want to see? What's the next initiative that you feel needs to be accomplished, and how do you get there?
Yeah.
Make sure you're focused on that, and that will help keep your head above water and keep some of that energy there, because you've got something bigger that you're looking for. There's something bigger that you're striving for, and not just walking in the next day and getting pounded on.
Yeah. Or this standard disease of looking through your mailbox whenever you have time. I mean, there will always be the unread emails. Exactly.
Because as we all know, you can spend that time, and 12 hours later, it's just as full.
Exactly.
And it's a lot of the same things, different stories.
I like your approach, and I like your advice, and from time to time, book the time. And I like what you said. It's about reserving the time for what I call sharpening the axe. Yes, when you are cutting the trees and the axe becomes not sharp, you should find the time, book the time, and sharpen it properly, so you will be more efficient and more motivated. Because exactly like you say, it's also about these burnouts and things like this that happen to many of the professionals, especially in some countries. If there is a atmosphere and the culture around the offices, I have been to these offices when it's like a competition who is the last one leaving the office. Right. And it's like a prestige question. If I'm leaving the office later, then that means that I'm more professional or whatsoever, more dedicated. But in fact, this means that I cannot organize myself probably.
Exactly. I'm mismanaging my business. I'm not handling this well.
So I really like your advice about having the helicopter view, more holistic view from time to time, and really sharpening your goals and your big ideas. Where are you heading next quarter, as you say, or next year, or some more long-term goals and ambitions. Really great, Daryl. If you can then come up with one, two, or a few big ideas that you want to share from your 20 plus years of experience to our listeners, to our future procurement community.
Sure. We talk quite a bit about relationships and communications and how to manage that. I don't want to underestimate that or understate that. That in itself, the constant communication upstream and downstream, from your role and in your organization is very important. That's where knowledge is gained. That's where the insight. That's where those problems are really solved. Because the people who don't know, they're the ones who overpay.
Yeah.
The people who don't know, they're the ones who miss the new ideas and the new products and the new innovations that might be something that they can really deliver on next year or next quarter. If you're not expanding beyond your computer, your emails, and your spreadsheets, you're going to be missing a lot of those opportunities. Working very hard, but not really getting yourself forward like you're expected to, and like you expect of yourself. So that I just want to reinforce the importance of that. To try to put more focus into your business relationships than you put in your data.
So to give a human face or the relationship to the figures. Okay.
Yes. Now, it's not to underestimate the importance of data, Robert, because data analysis and reports, but that helps you identify problems and opportunities. That helps you weed through and discover, maybe where to step next. But you need people in order to accomplish those large goals. The spreadsheet's not going to, the awareness of the problem isn't going to do it for you, or the awareness of the opportunity. You need people to be able to get that done, especially if you're looking to make large change, make big results. So once you see the problems and the opportunities, you need the people to get it done. So, a piece of advice that I have, when you think about books that are out there, different resources, and I'm sure our listeners have read every book there is on cost modeling and buying strategy and IT systems and e-procurement, and maybe some team building and so forth. But one of the ones that I just think is still just the best is Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence.
It is actually laying in front of me, and I see it with my eyes. So
really,
I really share your passion about this book.
Yes,
I really believe in it.
Published in 1936, and it's just the simplest read with the simplest tips and practices. There's the advantage of going through that book is twofold. Number one, it does give you real tips and real practices. But the experience of reading the book, which is not a difficult read, the experience of reading it, it forces you to reflect on your own personality and your own style.
Exactly.
It forces you to challenge yourself on how you might apply these tips and practices into your own life so it fits you. You can personalize that. And then, the combination of those tips and your awareness of yourself and your awareness of how your abilities and how to use that's where your effectiveness is going to increase. That's really the magic of that book, is the process of reflection as you're going through it to help you identify yourself and your strengths and your weaknesses, and then use some of those tips and practices to really help you. It's the foundation to an awful lot of growth in front of it. So if the listeners have not read that, I invite them to read it. And like I said, I try to make a practice of, even if I don't read it cover to cover, I'll pick it up and just start reading some pages or a chapter or a section.
Any random page you will open, you will find some insights in there.
Yes,
for sure. I agree.
And forces me to reflect, and forces me to think about, am I really doing this right? Should I really be practicing something different here?
Right, Daryl. I think your viewpoint to me reminds the comparison of IQ and EQ, having the emotional intelligence as a very powerful thing in human relation. I think by the same token, the building trust and good relationship in business is equally important, as you said, as data by itself. And as you said as well, that there is a full internet of all the knowledge and data that we want to get with, but really to build these strong relations, it requires much more than just data. Big thank you, Daryl, for this great and inspiring interview. This by far exceeded my expectations, honestly. And in the end of this podcast episode, I would ask you, Daryl, where can our listeners find you if they want to ask you questions on your big ideas or on something related to the things we discussed here in podcasts?
Oh, sure. Probably the best way is through LinkedIn. It's a global network. It's easy access. I'm sure everybody's already on it.
Yeah.
They can feel free to look me up and connect with me. The spelling of my name is Daryl, 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 Powers, Powers.
Right.
Reach out and connect with me, and I'd love to have dialogue either just through LinkedIn or over the phone. There's an awful lot that I can share, but I love to hear other perspectives and challenges that people are having because it helps me to grow as well. So I invite it.
In this discussion with you, I had so many more things that I want to ask you, but due to the limitation of time, I should keep it for myself or for later discussions with you, Daryl. So thank you very much. I will attach your contact to the footnotes of our podcast episode. And I'm very happy that Daryl Powers has joined us for today's podcast. And Daryl creates strong business relationship, growth, and profit. So thank you, Daryl, once again.
And Robert, I want to thank you as well. I too enjoyed this. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And I want to thank you not only for having me, but for the work that you do, really, sharing and distributing not just, my thoughts and perspectives here, but really expanding the procurement universe and all the practices and the people that are involved in it. It's a great network you have, and I hope you continue to be successful with it.
Thank you so much. As Steve Jobs said, if you are doing the things you love, then you would succeed. So I'm here doing really the things that I believe in and that I'm passionate about. So that's why it's a great fun for me as well.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much, Daryl.
Thank you too, Robert.
So that was a great discussion with Daryl Powers, and I really hope that you have taken some value from our discussion and you will use some of the tips and advice from Daryl for your procurement and supply chain organizations. And as always, I ask you to send us your feedback via email info@futureprocurement.net or via our profiles in LinkedIn, Facebook or Twitter. You can find me there, Robert Freeman, or you can find Future Procurement in all social networks. Share these podcasts with your friends and colleagues so that more people around the world can find out the best practices about procurement and supply chain management. My name is Robert Freeman, and this was Future Procurement. And now I will leave you with a little postscriptum after our talk to Daryl.
Great, I appreciate that, and I hope the listeners, feel it's a bit of a fresh approach as well, because I suspect,
exactly,
I know in procurement it's a lot of grind. You framed some of your questions very well in terms of what that community is really facing. It's a tough job, and it's a tough situation to be everybody's firefighter, and too often it does become data driven and data focused, and people will lose sight. They just become very narrow with blinders, and they don't see enough of what's around them, and that can really hurt them.
But hopefully with these thoughts that you have given, we will be able to give a little bit another approach and another perspective. And if you don't mind, I think this last phrase that you said, I will also include as postscriptum in this podcast.
Oh, sure. Please do. Add it in.